evening and welcome to Domination Submission Radio. My name is Michael Makai, and I am your host with the most BDSM kink and fetish talk on Blog Talk Radio. We've got a great show for you tonight. Our topic tonight is BDSM Furniture, and this is the follow-up to the last two shows that we have done. And we did a show on BDSM toys, and then we did a show on BDSM exotic toys, and now we're going to do a show on BDSM furniture. And what we're meaning by that is all of those large items that literally are going to be items of furniture in your home, too big to be called toys, but too important to ignore. So we're going to talk about those sorts of things tonight. This is a call-in show, so if you want to participate in the discussion this evening, by all means, give us a call, ask your questions, or air your comments. The number to call is 347-857-1862. Again, that number is 347-857-1862. I would also recommend that you check out our website, and that's at domination-submission.com. Again, domination-submission.com. There you'll find our links to social media such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other ways to contact us. You can also check us out at the bottom of the page. If you're listening to us on Blog Talk Radio, at the bottom of the page, you'll see a chat room there, and you can ask your questions, make your comments in the chat room at Blog Talk Radio if you're listening to us live as well. Tonight, I do have two co-hosts with me. Our third co-host, Lolita Sin, a professional fetish model, is unable to be here tonight, but I do have L.B. Shaw and Little Red with us. L.B. Shaw is the author of erotic fiction novels available on Amazon.com. Her latest one, soon to be released, is Becoming Stone, and that's L.B. Shaw. How you doing, L.B.?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good, too. I'm slow turning your microphone on, apparently. But,
I think we were at the same time.
Are you ready for this topic tonight? You were ready for this topic last week, weren't you? We weren't able to do it for technical issues.
I was prepared to some extent. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with the furniture either, but I'm always ready to.
Well, our second host tonight, co-host, is Little Red, a personal friend of mine, an extreme masochist who just happens to be celebrating a birthday today. How you doing, Red?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. Nice and toasty, warm, and
I got something for you, Red. Here you go.
Oh, God.
And one, and a two, and a 1, 2, 3, 4.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you.
Those are the studio minions, by the way.
I am now blushing.
Well, you know what goes along with that, right?
Okay, oh, that really,
So consider yourself virtually spanked for your birthday, Red.
Oh, I feel so loved.
It's kind of interesting to hear Red almost speechless, isn't it, LB?
It is, and I can't believe she blushed.
Well, redheads, it's a constant state for them. So, you ready for this topic, Red?
Absolutely. I have, like LB, I was waiting on last week, and I was like, ooh, topics and toys, and it's so much fun. And then we didn't do it, and I was all disappointed and cried. I had to cry myself this week because we didn't get a chance to do our show.
You guys are just so emotional. Technology is a bitch, unfortunately. And, in fact, we're using backup technology today because my internet service sucks. But we're going to drive on. So if you hear any weird things going on in the studio, it's either technology or because I'm not wearing any pants. All right. We've got a lot of things to talk about tonight. We're going to be talking about BDSM furniture. And by that, we mean St. Andrew's crosses. We're going to be talking about stocks and pillories, bondage beds, frames and hoists, sex swings, spanking benches, and a whole bunch of other miscellaneous things that we may even get a chance to talk about if we have enough time. And I realize that not everybody goes out and buys bondage furniture and keeps, their house full of it. Most people are lucky to have one piece of bondage furniture in the house, and usually they have to disguise that as something else because they have friends and they have kids and they have parents or whatever. So this is we're going to not just talk about the furniture itself, but how do you work it into the furnishing plan for your home and that sort of thing. So I think we're going to have a good time with that. Any first thoughts that you want to throw out there about bondage furniture, LB?
I was just thinking that that's probably one of the most difficult parts of getting furniture, other than I'm sure a lot of stuff is really expensive, but it's where to put it if you have kids. I met a nice couple at one of the munches we went to recently, and they actually bought a house and moved to like the next town over so that they could have a house with a dungeon in it and fill it up with all sorts of fun things. So I thought that was really interesting.
How about you, Red? I know that for a while, Red, you were thinking about building a little dungeon out at your place, weren't you?
Oh, I'm still in the process of doing it. It's just interesting turning 1,600 square feet into a dungeon.
Have you purchased any furniture for it yet?
Actually, I have probably $600 in supplies waiting for me to start actually building the equipment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have we have Red and I know some folks locally who have a really nice little dungeon which they have put together in their garage, and it's really interesting the way they've kind of disguised everything in there so that it has a dual use. So it's not really a BDSM frame and hoist; it's an engine hoist. So if you're going to ever work on the car, you could pull that engine, and those benches are also work benches. They're not necessarily bondage benches. So I mean, it's very interesting the way everything has a dual identity when it comes to the furniture. But let's go right into some of these specific pieces of furniture that we want to talk about, so that we can get to them in the next hour. So let's talk first about St. Andrew's crosses. It's probably the one thing that people think about first when they think about bondage or BDSM furniture. And it's a relatively simple piece of equipment. Any thoughts about St. Andrew's crosses, LB?
My only thought is that last summer I remember telling my husband that was the only thing that I really, really wanted to get in the way of furniture, and now, of course, it's a spanking bench. But, they've been looking to be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Red?
For me, they're a lot of fun because I like the restrictive part of it because, you have your wrist cuffs and your ankle cuffs. You can also be cuffed at the waist and attached to it, so you really can't move. And then, it's, of course, a flogging after all that is absolutely wonderful. So.
Right. A lot of people don't know even why it's called a St. Andrew's Cross. It's called a St. Andrew's Cross because the legend has it that St. Andrew, one of the 12 apostles of Christ, was martyred and killed on one of these things. And for those of you who've never seen one, it's a big X, essentially, a big wooden X for the most part, with ankle cuffs at the bottom and wrist cuffs at the top. And as Red said, sometimes there's a waist cuff at the center of the X, and sometimes it isn't an X. Sometimes it's a T, or sometimes it's a slightly different shape. But there are a couple other variations on these as well. For example, I've actually seen one that's on a swivel, so that it swivels at the center of the X. And so you get strapped into it standing up, and then it leans back, and for some people, they can even spin these things. So, I mean, it leans it back and it spins like a top or like a pinwheel. And there are other variations as well. And these things are probably the most common piece of equipment that you're going to see almost anywhere that you go. I mean, you're almost guaranteed to see a St. Andrew's Cross of some sort in any public or private dungeon that you go to. Have you ever seen anyone strapped into one of these things facing the cross instead of facing outward? I assume that it's done, but I've rarely seen it done that way.
I may have seen pictures, but I don't recall. I would think that would be good for flogging, right?
Well, if you want to flog somebody's back, it's probably the easiest way to do it. For some reason, most people are strapped into these things facing outward. Now, Red is our resident medical expert here. So, Red, tell me, what do you think is the most common way to get hurt using a St. Andrew's Cross?
Absolutely would have to be like your shoulders or your elbows, wrists, things like that, because people will start to struggle, and you're looking at a possible dislocation really quickly and easily.
I think that minor shoulder injuries or strain would probably be very common, but you want to know what the most common serious injuries would be? The thing falls over while you're attached to it. Unfortunately,
who doesn't secure their toys properly?
Exactly. There are a lot of people who go to great lengths to build or purchase a beautiful St. Andrew's Cross, and then they don't attach it to the wall properly. And if you are strapped to it by ankle and wrist cuffs and struggling or being flogged or being tickled or, having a violet wand run over your body or something, and it's really easy to shake something loose. And so when the when those anchors come out of the wall and this thing just falls forward and you're strapped to it, it's probably not going to be a lot of fun. So one thing you always want to do before you get strapped onto a St. Andrew's cross is you want to test it out to make sure that it's securely attached to if it's attached to a wall. Now, some of these things are attached to a tripod of some sort. So it's kind of a triangular base, the two bottoms of the X's being two of the 3 points of contact to the floor. And especially when you're dealing with a St. Andrew's cross that has a folding base or is a cross that is folding maybe or transportable so that you can take your own St. Andrew's cross to the party, that sort of thing. You want to really make sure that those things are secure and they're not going to fall over while you're attached to it because that can really put a crimp in your weekend, I would say. So any final thoughts on St. Andrew's crosses before we go on to stocks and pillories?
Nope.
I need a cricket sound effect. I need a sound effect that sounds like cricket. Definitely.
Well, I was waiting my turn because normally I'm the last one, so I was being nice and waiting.
Yes. Okay. Your turn, Red.
Okay, my turn. They're a whole lot of fun. You can disguise them. You know, if you get a collapsible one, you can turn them into table or small end tables. You can make them into plant holders. I mean, I've seen a number of ways people have hidden these that make it easy for you to have and not have to explain.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. If nothing else, they make great displays for something that, hanging plants and things like that, or arts and crafts, or painting or something. So, I mean, an easel, there are lots of different ways you can explain that big wooden cross in your living room. All right, so let's talk about stocks and pillories. Stocks and pillories. Now, a lot of people don't really think of them in those terms anymore, but these were very, very common back in the 1800s as ways of punishing evildoers and publicly humiliating them, putting them out in the square. I know that both of you have read my book, but I'm going to test you anyway. This is a pop quiz, and Red, since you were just saying that you never get to go first, I'm going to let you go first this time. What's the difference between what's the difference between stocks and pillories?
Oh, crap. I know stockades typically are for the neck and the wrist, so you have your hands in your neck, and it's attached to a base, and you're basically in a very uncomfortable L position.
You're getting it backwards. A pillory.
Is that pillory?
Yep. A pillory is used to restrain the hands and the neck. So when you see, like the quintessential image of the Salem witch trials where they put the witch out on public display and flogged her and then burned her at the stake or something like that, if the wooden device is around the neck and the hands, then it's a pillory. And a pillory can hold a human being either vertically, standing up with your head up through the wood device, or it can hold you in a horizontal position. And that's usually what you've seen pictures of. The Victorian images that you see of somebody with their head through this wooden thing and their hands through it. In fact, you've probably seen it at amusement parks and things like that. That's a pillory. We like to think of it as a stock, as a set of stocks, but it's a pillory. Now, stocks are generally used to immobilize only the arms and legs. And usually, because a person's arms and legs are stuck in it, they have to be sitting down. And so if somebody's sitting there with their arms and legs through the wooden device, those are stocks. If their head is through it, then that's a pillory. Crickets. I need crickets.
Got it.
Somebody got the cricket. So let me ask either of you, have either of you seen any stocks or pillories before in real life?
I've actually been in a pillory, since that's what it's actually called, and I thought it was a stock, yeah.
So tell us about the experience.
It's not pleasant. It was very, very heavy, uncomfortable, unfinished wood. I got splinters. It was just not pleasant.
Really?
But then again, another part of my life is doing reenactments, and I happen to prefer less modern times.
Mm-hmm. So you're one of those Society for Creative Anachronism people, am I right?
Kind of. I didn't actually join the SCA, but I knew some friends in it, and I've actually been to a couple different events.
I have a theory about those folks. I think a lot of them are closet kinksters. The SCA just gives them a good excuse for having things like stocks and pillories and swords and things. I don't know. Now,
it's a perfect cover because you can just say it's for SCA instead of for what it is. You can be like, oh, that's for when we do the reenactments. Oh, it's nothing.
There you go. Exactly. Any thoughts on stocks and pillories, LB?
My only thoughts are no, thank you.
Thank you. Well,
no, thank
even
you.
even in conjunction with spankings and canings and all those other things that you like?
I'm gonna say no. I just don't think I would enjoy that experience. I think it would be, well, I have arthritis in my neck too, so I think it would just be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen them before. I can't remember where I was where I saw them, and probably at some historical place or something like that. But I've seen them. They're real popular in the BDSM porn videos, and I've seen them. And
yeah. When I was stationed in Europe with the military, there's a place, I don't even remember what town it's in, but there's an institution in Germany called the Torture Museum. I think it's in Rothenburg. So if you're in Germany, you're listening in Germany, get to Rothenburg. Rothenburg is the way it's spelled, Rothenburg. And they have a torture museum there, and it's full of things like Iron Maidens, pillories, stocks, chastity belts, just you name it, they've got it there. And it's pretty freaking amazing, so go check it out. It's pretty neat. Some of the variations on the theme that I've seen for stocks and pillories are the tables. There are some folks out there who make tables, which are essentially, it comes apart and you stick your head up through it and they close it up and your head is poking up through the top of a table, which looks like any other kitchen table or dining room table, which is very, very cool, I think. I've also seen a few chain-suspended pillories where the pillory is not attached to a stand or doesn't have legs or anything like that. It's literally hung from a chain from the ceiling, which is kind of cool also, which kind of gives it a much more surreal look to it, I think. So I think you can have a lot of fun with these as long as you are being very careful about some of the downsides, some of the safety concerns that you might have with that. Red, you're our medical expert. Tell us about what safety concerns we might worry about with stocks and pillories.
Obviously, one is leaving the person in one position too long, because then you can do some damage depending on how you have them, how tight it is, circulation issues. You can have neuropathy happen where you're losing feeling, sensation, and do nerve damage. You can definitely do some serious damage if the weight's too much, and you can break bones.
Oh, yeah.
I just think about neck injuries for some reason.
Yeah.
You fall over or something. I mean, I guess that's what scares me about them.
Yeah, that's a little scary, I think. Particularly the human neck is a very fragile thing for the most part. In comparison to 2 or 3 inches of wood, the wood is going to win. I think the one thing you really have to worry about probably is if you have one of these devices attached to somebody in a standing position, it's really, really easy for somebody's knees to give out or the circulation to cause them to collapse somehow. And if somebody collapses while their head is doing one of these things, they will suffocate. They will strangle. So if nothing else, no one should ever be left in one of these things, whether it's a pillory or a stock, unattended for any length of time, because all you have to do is turn your back for a moment and their knees give out and that person is strangling and you don't even know it. So that would be the number one safety concern on my list. All right, so let's talk about bondage beds next. And bondage beds are probably the one piece of BDSM furniture that almost everybody out there, even the vanilla folk, find fascinating. And they take a lot of different forms. So we'll just start with Red this time, since it's your birthday, Red. See, normally I ask questions in seniority order, and Red's the newest member of our crew here, so she gets to go last most of the time. So, but it's her birthday, so you're going to go first. Tell us about thoughts you have on bondage beds, Red.
Oh my God, I saw this most amazing bed I still want to make. It's out of steel, and it's got hooks on the top so you can do chain suspension. It's got kind of a pillory. It's got the head and the hands at the footboard of the bed. It's got a cage underneath of it. And it was just, oh, my God, I want it so badly. And I'm trying to figure out how I can, I'm trying to figure out how I can get a welder and how big I want to make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've seen the picture that you're talking about, and it's gorgeous. It really is. I mean, you look at this thing and you go, wow, that's really, really nice. How about you, LB? Any thoughts on bondage beds?
Yeah, I'm with Red. They look like a lot of fun. I've seen probably a lot of the same pictures that she has with the cage underneath and the holes, and they definitely look really beautiful. It's hard to explain to the kids, though.
Well, all you need to do is actually drape something over the bottom of it so the cage is covered if you have that kind. And then throw a throw blanket over the footboard and then you're good to go, because the hooks could be for the curtains, and I'm using air quotes, for the curtains that go around the four posts, so there's a way to get around that.
Well, of course, we know kids would never just raise up a curtain or look under a blanket or anything, right?
Never. But what's funny is our dogs sleep under the bed anyway, so we could always use that excuse. Well, the cage is for the dogs, and of course, the kids would get under there. My daughter used to get, and we have like a big crate for the dogs, and she used to get in there all the time and lock herself in it. So she would just look at it as a toy for herself, probably.
That apple didn't fall far from the tree, did it?
No, definitely not.
So now, for our listeners who may not be familiar with bondage beds, let me just talk a little bit about what a bondage bed actually is. It's a bed frame. It doesn't necessarily include all the little goodies that Red is talking about, but it's a bed frame that lends itself easily to having things attached to it. And by that, we usually mean there are eye bolts, or there are D-rings or hooks, or places where you can attach snap links or chain or rope easily, so that you can play bondage games on the bed without a whole lot of trouble. And they don't always have high-rise frames attached the way Red is talking. Some bondage beds are just not much different than a store-bought bed. It just has extra reinforcements at the head and the foot, and rings there that you can attach things to. But the really nice ones have a raised frame, kind of like your 4-post bed with canopy, except instead of a canopy up there, you've got all sorts of cool places to attach your bondage toys and that sort of thing. Sometimes you can even get an electric hoist put in there, and those sorts of things too. So all kinds of cool things you can do with it. And as Red was saying, you can also put a cage under the bed. Sometimes you can attach a St. Andrew's cross at the end of the bed. There's just no end to the different variations on the theme that you can come up with. But we're talking a lot of money. The more complicated it gets, the more expensive it's going to get. And unless you're very handy with constructing your own furniture, you can expect to pay a lot of money for this sort of thing. A couple $1,000 at least for the one that Red was just describing. I'm sure of it. However, if you are a welder, or you know a welder, and you could probably do it pretty inexpensively if you can find the plans for it. And if you do, by the way, let me know. I'm looking for some good plans for that particular one that Red's talking about. I've seen the picture myself, and I think it's wonderful. In fact, if you've got me on Facebook, I'll look for the picture and I'll post it on Facebook right after the show if you're wondering which one we're talking about. Because
I'll
really
send it to you. I have it.
Well, I have it too. Don't worry about that. I've definitely got it. I mean, I look at it every couple days and go, yep, that's at the top of my list. All right,
yeah,
so
that's one on my Christmas list for next year.
We're going to take a quick musical break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Domination Submission Radio. I'm Michael Makai, and my co-hosts this evening are L.B. Shaw and Little Red. We'll be back in about a minute and a half. BDS Radio. My name is Mike Makai. My co-hosts are LB Shaw and Little Red. We're talking about bondage furniture, BDSM furniture. And by that, we're talking about the toys that are just too big to keep in the toy box. Things like St. Andrew's crosses, stocks and pillories, bondage beds. And our next topic is frames and hoists. And frames can mean just about anything, and they usually do. When you go to a dungeon, whether it be a public dungeon or a private dungeon, the frames that you see are in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And in fact, there are people who will even go out and purchase, for example, a child's swing set and use that as a frame. Just take the swings off, and you've got a frame ready to go. So tell me what you think about frames and hoists, Red.
They're a lot of fun because you can use them for a number of different things, from, restriction to suspension, for floggings, canings, croppings, all the way to the shibari and the decorative suspension. So, you can use those for just about everything.
Yeah, absolutely. They're a lot of fun, and you and I know a few people who have used swing sets as BDSM frames or hoists, and they work very well. There's no reason why not to use it. I mean, they are designed to hold weight and to be stable, and so there's nothing that says you can't go out and buy a child's playground set. Use it as your own BDSM furniture in the house if you want to. LB,
it's perfect because all you need to do is take the swings off, and you have the hooks right there, and you're good to go.
Absolutely. LB, what do you think?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned using the swing set frame, because I would probably want to have a bondage swing or use it for a bondage swing. I think that would be a lot of fun. I'd have a lot of fun with that.
Mm-hmm. That was the next piece of furniture we were going to talk about, which was swings. Most folks in the vanilla world consider them sex swings, but of course BDSM doesn't necessarily include sex the way most people think it does. So we tend to think of it as a BDSM swing or a support or a frame and hoist. And as Red has said, we tend to think of it in terms of suspensions. Vanilla folk tend to think of it as a sex swing for the most part. But so we'll just kind of lump this in together with frames and hoists and swings. What do you find interesting about swings, LB?
They all look so different in so many different ways. I think one of my favorites was it had a round, a round frame, and hanging from the frame was white, like a strap. The whole thing was white, so it was really pretty. And it had this like a harness to sit in, and then it had straps for the feet, and it just looked really fun. And then some are just handmade out of rope. They all look so different, and I guess so many different ways you could use it.
How about you, Red? Any thoughts?
I'm not a big fan of the swings because, typically that is thought of for sex. You can use it for restricting and for flogging, caning, things like that. But I'm not a really big fan of them because I really don't like the feeling of not having my feet on the ground that way. It's one thing to be suspended in rope because then I know I have 60 points of contact with the rope. This is a weird feeling for me and not pleasant for me.
Interesting. Strangely enough, I played with almost all of these items at one point or another, but I have not played with a swing before. I actually sold them at one point. I worked my way through college selling blow-up dolls and sex swings, believe it or not, and I joked that I used to do it door-to-door, but I didn't. I sold them out of a store. But people ask what I did in college. I worked my way through college as a door-to-door blow-up doll salesman. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. But I have no experience with swings, and I'm not even sure I would want to. I find them curious. I find them interesting. I think they're more of a novelty than anything. Unfortunately, you also have a lot of crappy stuff out there on the market that masquerades as swing or something. I used to be very much in the marketing business, and it's bad that some of these companies will just take any old thing. They'll take a couple of leather straps and that they couldn't sell as a belt, and they call it a sex swing and sell and relabel it and mark the price up 200% and sell it that way. So you just never know. Some of the stuff out there is really, really bad. So you want to be very, very careful. If you're going to buy something like a sex swing, be really careful. Check it out. Look for references. For all you know, you're going to spend $100, $200 for something, and you open the box, and there's really nothing more than a couple of ropes and a leather strap or two. So, and in that sense, it could be very dangerous. So just be real careful about those sorts of things. So now we're going to get on to LB's absolute favorite piece of BDSM furniture, and that would be spanking benches, I'll bet. Am I right, LB?
It probably would be.
So
they look like in the gymnastics horses. That's what they remind me of. Yeah, I think it would. I think I would definitely enjoy having that piece of furniture in my house if it got used.
Tell us why.
Because I enjoy spankings.
Yeah, but why do you need a spanking bench?
I don't really need a spanking bench. It's just, honestly, I guess it's just one of those things that's just interesting and cool to look at, and maybe being bent over and tied, with your wrist bound to the legs. And I don't know that I have a piece of furniture in my house that I can do that with. I mean, maybe a chair, but
just got a couch?
That I can, no, not that I can be restrained in that way. Yeah, I have a couch.
Because, a lot of couches, you just move them away from the wall, and then you just bend over the back of it and tie your wrists to the front legs of the couch and your feet to the back legs of the couch, and you got a spanking bench. Can you tell I've done this before?
Yeah.
All right, so Red, tell us what your thoughts on spanking benches. Little Red, are you there?
Sorry.
Loser?
I actually muted myself. Blonde moment. It's all grits and gravy.
Blonde moment for a redhead.
Hey, now. Redheads can have blonde moments, too. I think they're a cool little piece of furniture. I mean, you can disguise them as almost anything. Mm-hmm. Varying in sizes. I mean, you can go all the way from the standard piece of wood with a little leather covering for your abdomen to rest on, and, you bend over that way, all the way to elaborate ones that position you, and angle this way, angle that way, and it's only what you can imagine that's your limit for those. Because, you can make it out of just about anything as long as it obviously can support the weight of the person you're having lean against it.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. You're limited only by your imagination when it comes to these sorts of things, because all you're really talking about is any piece of furniture that you can be bent over and attached to so that you can't go away in the middle of your spanking. And one of the most common things used by people for spanking benches is discarded weight benches. Those benches that used to go with your Bowflex workout gym or something like that, your weight set. Those weight benches tend to hang around a lot longer than people are interested in the weights that came with them. And sometimes you can pick them up for a song or almost next to nothing. When people are tossing them out for the trash people to pick up, you can sometimes pick up some really nice weight benches that can be transformed into spanking benches very, very easily. In fact, a lot of people I've talked to have had great success with that. Do you have a spanking bench, Red? Actually, a mutual friend of ours gave me one before he left, so I actually do own one. Oh, very cool. If we're talking about the same friend, all I got was a kicking bag from him. Hey, that's good practice for flogging. Yeah, absolutely. It is. So now, are you going to get one, LB? Are you going to get a spanking bench?
No. I can guarantee you that's not going to happen.
Not until
we can't figure out how to use the couch. You know what else would work well is a stool. I think a stool would work well. Yeah, because they do. Got the four legs. Yeah. Stools work well. Small tables, coffee tables will work really well as long as it's adequately padded or protected from damage and that sort of thing. There are a lot of neat little sturdy coffee tables that can be turned into something like this without any problem whatsoever. It's very, very simple to do. So spanking benches, lots of fun. All right, Red, our medical expert, tell us what we have to worry about when it comes to spanking benches. Obviously, you can do damage with having the restraints too tight. You can cut off circulation. If you have them in too much pressure on the ribs, you can obviously crack a rib. You can dislocate your shoulder if you violently thrash. You can pop a hip out of place. You can absolutely hit the wrong place and do some damage. I mean, it's all your standard safety concerns. The only thing is, obviously, if you're restraining anybody in any fashion, don't ever, ever, ever take your eyes off of them or turn your back on them or leave them alone for even a millisecond, because that's all it takes for something to go wrong. Along those same lines, we've been talking about spanking benches and stools. Now, there are lots of chairs and stools with specialized functions that
are also used as BDSM furniture, not necessarily for spanking. I guess the only thing that really makes a spanking bench is the fact that it leaves your butt exposed so that it can be spanked or caned or whipped or flogged or whatever. But there are lots of other similar types of furniture that are not specifically for spanking. And so we're talking about benches that are, for example, there are sex benches. A sex bench is used primarily to have sex on, and so it would probably be just a little bit different than a spanking bench. There are a lot of people in the lifestyle who are into medical play or gynecological play, so that they have those chairs with the stirrups in them, so that they can pretend to be gynecologists or whatever. There are the types of chairs and benches used for CBT or cock and ball torture. So obviously you don't want something, if you're going to be torturing somebody's naughty bits, and I guess you have to be a guy if it's going to be cock and ball torture. If you're going to be torturing some guy's naughty bits, you've got to have furniture that leaves that stuff accessible to you. And if he's sitting on it, you can't torture it. So obviously you need a little bit of specialized furniture for that. There's also, for specialized types of play, there are other types of furniture. For example, one of Red's favorites is electrical play. I've seen Red lit up like a Christmas tree at the end of a violet wand. What kind of furniture do you think would work well for a violet wand play or other electrical play, Red?
I have a portable massage table, and it actually works out pretty well because I can do the cupping on it, and then we can turn around and use it for the violet wand. It's also good for spankings. Just saying.
Now, you just
I like
go
to hear Red laugh.
Yeah. She has a giggle fit every once in a while. It's her birthday. We gotta let her do it. Has either of you ever seen a queening stool? You know what a queening stool is?
Those are weird pieces of furniture.
It sounds like you're tap dancing there, Red. Are you telling me you don't know what one is?
It's basically used when they're doing it looks to me like a child's toilet seat. It really does.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's weird to me, because I'm like, I potty train my kids on something like that, so that's weird.
Mm-hmm. Well, for our listeners, those of you who may not be familiar with what a queening stool is. A queening stool is, just like Red said, it's almost like a little potty seat that you potty train your kids with, and it's essentially a small stool or chair with a hole in the seat so that your bottom and your genitals are accessible to some poor schmuck who is underneath the chair, and usually he or she is restrained under the chair, so tied up and slid under there so that his face is facing upward through the hole in the seat. And this is used for what is generally referred to as face sitting, although you have the benefit of a stool to sit on. So you don't have to actually sit on the person's face. You sit on the stool, but there's a hole in the stool for the person's face. That's what a queening stool is. So and of course, like you said, Red, I mean, you could always tell your friends that you're potty training somebody. Yeah. Let's see, any other specialized benches, chairs that you can think of that we have not covered so far?
You forgot my favorite.
Which is?
Cages.
We're getting there. We're talking chairs and benches right now. Cages is the next thing on my list. I have a list here, We've got to stay with the program. Got an agenda here. Cages. All right. Since it's your birthday, we'll talk cages now. Tell me what you like about cages.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely, like LB was saying, playing in large kennels and locking myself in kind of started it. And I actually like the feeling of the den style, where it's not all open around all the sides. It's just open in the front, because then I feel very secure in it. It's my little hideaway.
Mm-hmm. It's like your little, like a pillow fort or something, right? I mean, or your blanket fort.
Yeah, kind of. Only, a lot more secure, and unless you have the key to the lock, you ain't getting in.
Mm-hmm. LB, any thoughts on cages?
I'm glad you asked, because cages have always kind of, what's the word, eluded me. I don't know if that's the right word. I should know, being a writer. I never really understood stood the draw until probably somewhat recently, and I think it's probably something I would enjoy. I never really thought about it as a kink or anything, but I might enjoy it if it were used in a positive way.
Tell me how you use it. How would you use a cage in a positive way?
Well, I mean, as opposed to like a form of punishment, I think something like that might kind of freak me out a little bit, but I think it would be fun just role-playing and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, there's something about a cage for a person that just fascinates the crap out of just about everybody, including vanilla folk. I mean, you could show it to the most vanilla person you know, and they would be fascinated with it, I'm sure. In fact, they might even want to get inside just to check it out or something. And there's just something really very cool about the cage specifically designed for a person. And of course, they all come in a lot of different variations, sizes, styles, materials. Cages can be built out of everything from wood to PVC to solid steel or aluminum. And you could probably put one together easily, even if you're not a welder. In fact, I spent just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, I took some pictures, which I can share with folks if anybody's interested. I went to Hobby Lobby, which is, I don't know if they're all over the country, but they are pretty predominant out here. And they actually have these grates that are used for decorative purposes. And just imagine the sort of a steel grate that you would put in front of your fireplace, for example. Well, they had these things that were about 5 or 6 feet long and about 3 or 4 feet high and made out of steel and very decorative, very pretty, but they were designed primarily to be pretty as decoration. Just one panel, I guess. I guess you would hang it on the wall or put it in front of your fireplace or hang your flowers from it or something, I don't know. But the first thought that went through my mind was, I could buy 4 of these, or I could buy 3 of these and 2 end pieces, and I have a beautiful cage, a really nice cage, and it could probably be put together for under $200. So if you're thinking that you need to spend $1,000 on a cage, you really don't. You just have to be imaginative and resourceful and get out there and see what's available. So I personally, I think cages are kind of cool. I'm kind of with LB. I've never found them to be attractive personally to me. Obviously, I'd never want to be in a cage. I'm kind of on the opposite side of that dynamic. But, and to be honest with you, I've never had this urge to put anybody in a cage. But there's just something so cool about them. And I've had subs in my life over the years and decades who just loved cages. I mean, they wanted to sleep in the cage. They wanted to be, they wanted to be put in the cage for punishment. They wanted to be put in the cage for reward. They just wanted to be put in the cage for anything. It really didn't matter, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, cages are some people just love them. They really do, and it's kind of cool.
That will probably be my daughter. She's older.
Well, there are even, you can actually purchase fairly large cages for animals that will fit a person just fine. And so, I mean, you don't even have to specifically go out there looking for a cage just for people. I mean, you find a cage for a Mastiff or a Great Dane, and it works just fine for a sub or slave as well. So some things to think about. And, cages don't necessarily have to be stark and bare either, bare bars. I mean, I have seen cages that are just elegant and beautiful and comfortable with mattresses inside of them, and they're just like a little tiny apartment. So there's a lot of things you can do with them, and you can have a lot of fun with them, I think. And I'll be honest with you, when I start outfitting my own dungeon, and I've owned a lot of equipment and stuff in the past, but I always end up leaving it behind when that relationship ends. And so I always end up having to replace everything over and over and over again. But I'm really now looking at some furniture, and cage is one of the first things on my list, believe it or not. Even though I'm not a big cage fanatic, there's just something about cages that really grab your imagination, So if nothing else, they make awesome conversation pieces. Put that at the top of your list. I think you'll enjoy it if you get a chance to get one. All right, so let's see if there's anything we've missed here. We've talked benches, stools, beds, frames, hoists, swings, stocks and pillories. How about a rack? You ever seen a rack, LB?
On TV.
On TV. How about you, Ray?
Looks horrible.
I think I saw one in a dungeon, and I don't remember if anybody was on it. It was a while ago, and I think Yeah, nobody was on it. Everybody stared at it, but nobody touched it.
Well, again, for our listeners, a rack is essentially just a table. Sometimes it's horizontal, sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it's on a slant, but it's essentially a table with restraints at each end, but on one end, the restraints are attached to a rotating cylinder, and that cylinder is itself attached to a ratcheting mechanism so that you can tighten it up, kind of like a ratchet wrench or something. And you've seen the torture devices in the movies from the time of Middle Ages, where they literally put somebody on the rack and they stretched him until they pulled his arms and legs out of their sockets and essentially caused him lots and lots of agony. And this is probably one of the most feared forms of torture ever. In fact, there are stories going back of people who would commit suicide on the way to being put on the rack. So, I mean, the guards would be pulling you out of the dungeon and taking you to the rack to torture you, and these poor SOBs would commit suicide rather than go through that. So this is not fun. Not fun at all, and very, very painful. Most of the modern-day racks that you see now are not anywhere near that painful. They're usually just designed to stretch you out and keep you in place while something else is being done to you, such as a flogging or a violet wand or tickling or whatever. So no need to commit suicide if somebody's going to put you on the rack these days. Any further thoughts on racks from you two?
I'll pass on that kind of thing.
I do need those cricket sound effects. I'm going to have crickets by next week. I guarantee it. That way I won't even ask them.
Well, in our defense, we are both a little under the weather, just a little bit.
Well, I am too. This is a crappy time of the year. I mean, everybody's coming down with stuff, and even if you're not coming down with something, the weather just sucks. So, all right, so we have talked.
In my defense, I am on antibiotics and medications and things like that, so I'm actually doing good just to be coherent.
Yeah, and plus you're a redhead. So.
Being a redhead has nothing to do with this.
All right, so we've covered pretty much everything that I wanted to in the show, and we're at the last couple of minutes. Tell me what's going on with your books and that sort of thing, LB.
I'm working on several right now. I know I probably shouldn't do that, but I'm working on Becoming Stone, and I'm also working on a paranormal story that has somewhat of a DS element to it. I wouldn't be surprised if it's ready pretty soon, and hopefully Becoming Stone will be too. But I've got the 3 that are out now.
Great, super. 3 books out on the market. If you're interested in picking up a book by L.B. Shaw, just go to Amazon and search her name, and or go to her website, and she's got them all listed there. So my book's doing pretty good. I am just amazed at how well it's doing. It hasn't even been out 90 days yet, but it's been in the top 10 in 3 different categories, and top 10 books in the country, not just kinky books, but top 10 books in the country in 3 different categories, and the categories have been love, marriage, and relationships. So I'm really, really jazzed about that. I've been way ahead of projections, so I'm really, really happy about that. And also, I have started an affiliate program, so if you're interested in making money by recommending my book to other people, especially if you have a blog or a large following in social media, then check that out at my website at Domination-Submission.com. Make a few bucks every time you recommend the book to somebody. So other than that, things are going well. I want to thank everybody for listening. This has been a great show. I'm Mike Makai. My co-hosts are L.B. Shaw and Will Red, and we'll say goodnight and leave you with a happy birthday song for Will Red. Take care now. Bye-bye.
And a 1, and a 2, and a 1, 2, 3, 4.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear you.
Little Red.
I'm here to giggling.
That's because I muted it. I was laughing so hard I have tears in my eyes.